Well, hello, Andrew here again. I got yesterday's episode number wrong. Yesterday was 108, not 107. Today, therefore, will presumably be 109. And we're continuing through the Sermon on the Mount. And we come to a rather uncomfortable passage. The last couple have been a little bit that way, a little bit of an edge to them. And this is Matthew chapter 5, verses 15 through to 20. So here we go. Brace yourselves. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. Wow. Interested in what your first reaction might be. Me, when I'm honest, my first immediate reaction is it me? Is it me that is the bad tree? Is it me with the bad fruit? Is it me? And you might think that's patently obvious, or yeah. Is it you? Is it me? And I think it's a good place to start. Because then I tend to move on to thinking, no, it's not me, it's others who are not like me. People who see the world differently from the way that I do. Even Christian brothers and sisters who have a particular bent and a particular way of seeing and being. The other, those ones over there, it must be them who are the bad trees and the bad fruit. But the question still niggles away underneath. Is it me? Is it me? When I was at theological college in the Christology class, our lecturer, Stephen May, was great. Very interactive, really enjoyed his classes. But anyway, what he did was he showed a movie. It was 1960s Dennis Potter, Son of Man. I found it highly offensive. I nearly walked out. Seriously, I nearly walked out. And my memory is that it started with this grubby, ragged individual in this really hot, miserable, deserty place. And he was all twisted and all gnawed, and he had this question, is it me? Is it me? Is it me? Is it me? And he was obviously in a terrible space. And it took me a little minute, 2 or 3, to realize that this was Jesus. This was Jesus in his temptations in the desert. And as I say, I was offended by it. I was offended by much of the movie. And yet, I stuck it out. And yet, as I reflected back upon it, it really was one of the most useful things I'd seen. Because I recognised that the Jesus that I had in my head walked a foot above the ground. He wasn't really one of us. He wasn't really human. He didn't really struggle with the same things that you or I struggle with. He really wasn't one of us. And I found this really, really useful. And it's the question of the self-doubt. The temptations that are those 3 temptations. If they weren't real temptations, they weren't temptations. They weren't questions, they weren't issues and struggles that Jesus had within himself. And I wanted to suggest that the is it me question is, and perhaps needs to be, a live one for each of us. Something that we carry within us, a measure of uncertainty that is actually good for us. When we get to the other end of Jesus' ministry 3 years later, we see him gathered with his disciples in the upper room. And he tells them that one of them is going to betray him. Now, it's easy to miss this, but if you look at the narratives carefully, you'll see that each of them has the same question. They may not have verbalized it, but it was there for each of them. Is it me? Could it be me? Could I be the one who betrays my Lord? Could it be me? And there's a sense that each of them recognize within themselves a weakness, a flaw, a capacity not to be as steady as they would like to imagine themselves being. It's the same when Peter said that he would never betray Jesus. We always focus on Peter and his denials. And yet when you look at the text, you see that they all said the same. It wasn't just Peter, it was all of them. And there's a sense that we all carry with us an uncertainty about, if sufficient pressure came on, what it is that we might do, how it is that we might behave. Is it me? And it might be when I started out that you imagine that this is a problem. I'm wanting to suggest potentially it's a good thing. It's a good thing that we have that question, because there's a sense that we can then hold it all before God. God who is the ground of our beseeching. The God who yearns to walk with us and can really only do that when we acknowledge our need. That it's not all about us. It's about who God is and what God is doing in us and through us. And then we're not going to make it on our own. A good tree only produces good fruit, says Jesus, and a bad tree only produces bad fruit. My worry is, am I producing any kind of fruit, good or bad? The reality is that I don't see much of it. Not in the lives of those around me. I can see hints of it in myself. I can see a trajectory, a process of learning over the years, a process of grace and growth. But I'm not perfect by any means. And how do we measure it? And I think we'll be coming on to that. Do we measure it by success in ministry? By how powerful we are in the gifts of the Spirit? As prayers, as people who have a deliverance ministry? Of powerful in preaching and teaching, or in success in accumulating stuff and being good givers? As they measures of the fruit? Because in many ways I would see myself as a failure in those areas. Or are they to be measured in the fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Galatians chapter 6? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, the 9 fruit of the Spirit. My hunch is it's more in that direction that fruitfulness is measured. And even there, I'm a work in progress, and I imagine that you might be also. I want to suggest today that it's good to have the question, because it keeps us open. It keeps us open to the working of God, and it keeps us open to the awareness that we don't have it all together, that there are fault lines in each of our lives, and that there's places for each of us where we know that we need to be careful, and that we need to be open to what God might be wanting to do or say or work within us. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful. God bless you.